Scenen. Här ska vi nu prata om ett helt nytt svenskt kosttillskott som har tagits fram och nyligen lanserat på marknaden. En helt unikt kosttillskott som kan hjälpa oss, inte bara med vår huds åldrande, utan faktiskt hur vi mår i stort. Och om detta så ska Scott Boyer prata. Varmt välkommen upp på scen.
Tack.
Scott, du är VD på Klaria som äger det här filmimplantatet. Och du är toxikolog. Vad är en toxikolog?
Jag är den som egentligen gillar när saker och ting går fel i kroppen. När man tar in något ämne som man egentligen inte ska ha i kroppen. Så.
Och det är det du har vikt ditt liv åt och kan. Och det är därför du ska få förklara hur det här kosttillskottet fungerar. Det är ingen som kan göra det bättre än du. Jag lämnar scenen till dig. Och så kommer Scott prata på engelska. Men han förstår och kan prata svenska också. Så när vi får möjlighet att ställa frågor på slutet så kan vi prata svenska. Men nu kommer vi köra engelska.
Bra.
Varsågod Scott.
Bra. Engelska det var för att igår var det inspelning på svenska. As Jessica mentioned, Scott Boyer, and I am actually not so involved in Resveratrol directly, but actually CEO of a company that uses this particular film platform for managing pain patients, particularly cancer pain patients, but also difficult migraine and cluster headache patients. But one of the things in my now 25 plus years of experience in the drug industry has shown me that a lot of our patients actually are not strong enough to take some of the treatments that we've developed for them. And so one of the ideas behind this particular film and Resveratrol in general was that we needed a way to make people both internally and externally stronger, to support them both in the hospital setting, but also to make them biochemically stronger. So this is one of the ways that we have developed this. And I think one of the things to mention is that we've developed this about a year and a half ago. And we started taking, because it's a nutritional supplement, we started taking it ourselves. We started giving it to our parents, and what we were hoping was that we would see some kind of general increase in energy and increase in their flexibility. And one of the reasons I'm standing here is the first thing we saw was an improvement in their skin tone, an improvement in the quality of their hair, and an improvement in the quality of their nails. Which, of course, you see in the biochemistry of resveratrol, but it was a little bit surprising. So the first product, actually, that we've now developed is particularly for people who want to see some improvements in their skin quality. So, as Jessica mentioned, I'm a toxicologist, and I became interested in this because resveratrol is a natural plant product. And we take in plant products all the time. Some of them are good for us, and some of them are less good for us. But as a toxicologist, I'm interested in that little bit of challenge to your biochemical system that makes you stronger when a real stress comes along. And so I want to just tell you a little bit of my voyage to resveratrol and why I'm interested in it. It involves three things. One is the concept of hormesis, and I'll get into that in a second. The second is actually the concept that most organisms live longer if they eat less under their entire lifespan. The third concept is a fairly well-documented effect that's called the French paradox, and I'll explain that in a minute. So what's hormesis? Hormesis, for toxicologists, hormesis essentially is having the right level of stress, right? So, unfortunately, most of us actually live in a world now where we're not so prepared biochemically for stress. a little bit too much red wine, a little bit too much, too little sleep, a little too much stress at work, those kinds of stresses. And when a large stress comes along, then our preparation is not optimal. So as a toxicologist, essentially what you want is for people to be more prepared for when a real stress comes along. This is the idea of hormesis, that essentially you take a little bit of something to increase your stress response, right? And this seems to be what resveratrol does. It actually increases your preparedness for real stresses. The next concept is caloric restriction. Caloric restriction is a well-known phenomenon now. You basically decrease the amount of food you take in, and your health status and your lifespan actually increases. Works for worms, works for flies, works for monkeys, works for mice, probably works for us if we had the patience to actually measure it. The third concept I wanted to touch on, and what connects all of these things to resveratrol, is what's called the French paradox. I don't know how many of you have seen or heard of the French paradox, but essentially the French paradox is a fairly well-documented medical phenomenon wherein the French and actually most people from Mediterranean countries, where red wine consumption is a fairly normal part of sort of breakfast, lunch, and dinner, they actually have a much lower occurrence of cardiovascular disease. Okay. For a long time, we couldn't figure that out because their consumption actually of saturated fats are much higher than most of the rest of the world. So that's what the paradox was. And it's been studied in, I think, since the late 70s, and the first papers came out in the 80s, basically showing that this was a rather strange thing. And what you can see in this French paradox is that the French actually have the same high cholesterol that the rest of us have. They have strange lipid profiles, but they don't get the end disease. And so these guys, Renault in particular, was one of the first ones to publish these findings, and their hypothesis at the time was that it was because of alcohol. But we know now that's probably not the alcohol. It's probably one of the components in red wine that's doing this. There's been a lot of research on what that component actually is, and it boils down to one or two. And the primary one is resveratrol. I'll come to where resveratrol comes from. But there's been a lot of research on this, so I'll show you in a second. But in 2006, essentially it was the first coupling of two things. One was the mechanism of red wine in this kind of phenomenon, and the other was the finding that essentially the effect of caloric restriction, or in fact exercise, are the same thing. So they go through the same biochemical pathways. Drink red wine, or you decrease the amount of food you take in. The effect on your genes is the same. The overall effect, of course, you can see is an anti-aging effect. I know this has been proven in any number of animals. And we know a lot about the biochemical pathways, so we know actually what happens. So what is resveratrol actually? It's a normal part of the skin of many fruits. It's a normal plant constituent, really. It's very concentrated, though, in fruits such as grapes, such as blueberries, lingual, and cranberries. It has a couple of functions in plants. One is antimicrobial, antifungal, antibacterial, and the other is, of course, that it is kind of a waxy substance. If you take pure resveratrol, it's a little bit waxy. It's one of the wax constituents of the shells of grapes. As I mentioned before, a lot of research on resveratrol, and just for comparison, this is about 1,000 papers per year now that are published on resveratrol. It's about the same number that's published on caffeine. So we scientists actually have taken quite a keen interest in this class of molecules and resveratrol particularly. As I mentioned, we know a lot about how resveratrol works. One of the primary mechanisms is just this. It actually activates a protein called SIRT1. SIRT1 actually has positive effects on fat, mitochondria. The most interesting effect, perhaps, of SIRT1 is the fact that it acts more or less like a doggy swallow. It runs around and basically keeps order in the cell. It biochemically basically puts toys back, puts things back, shuts off the lights, turns off the water, makes sure that there's order. And as we age, our cells become more K-like. And the SIRT1 in our cells actually decreases. And what resveratrol does is it actually turns the SIRT1 back on, activates it, so that it can do all of the things that it did when we were 10, 20 years old. So, not so strange that it has so many effects, and a lot of the people that have been using Resveratrol, the supplement that we've developed, actually do see these kinds of changes. A lot of them have lost, a few kilos. Many of them actually do feel a bit better, more energy. But the primary thing, as I mentioned before, is that they see these effects on their skin tone, skin quality. As I mentioned, SIRT1 is one of the primary actors in this, and it's also the thing that's activated when you exercise. It's the thing that's activated when you are starving. It's a stress response, but it's a good stress response. It holds your preparedness at the right level. Unfortunately, as I mentioned, it goes down with age, it decreases. Resveratrol seems to activate the SIRT1 that we have left. The research that I had shown in a few slides before basically has resulted in positive effects in most organ systems, and they are various, and it really depends on what is the pathology in the individual. But you can see positive effects on eyes and muscles, and actually in a lot of the connective tissues. I think these connective tissue effects are probably some of the most interesting ones, because I had mentioned that a lot of the people taking this actually have experienced stronger nails, changes in their hair, and particularly changes in their skin tone. There is a published body of evidence showing the biochemical mechanisms of the skin changes, so it's not so strange that we're seeing these. And skin pathologies that are more severe than just a few sunspots on your forehead actually are being treated now, like psoriasis, with resveratrol. So general skin conditions can be treated with resveratrol as well. There's also biochemical evidence behind the fact that people feel slightly less hungry and also lose a little bit of weight on resveratrol. So this is one of the mechanisms. Basically, it acts on your hunger system in your brain and kind of evens out your hunger. Particularly older people seem to have a stronger hunger effect than younger people on resveratrol in our experience. So those are some of the aspects of resveratrol that we've seen, and it's a very promising dietary supplement. You can buy it in any health store, but the way you buy it in health stores usually is as a capsule to take orally, usually once a day. The problem is that resveratrol isn't really available to your body if you take it orally into the stomach and into the intestine. And I'll explain in a second why. That's one of the reasons that I thought that perhaps it was better to take it in a different way via these films. The reason it's not really available to your body if you take it as a capsule is the following. This is a schematic. I tried to make it as cartoon-like as possible to not show real pictures of anatomy here, but here is your small intestine, and we're equipped with quite effective enzyme systems, both in the small intestine and in the liver, to get rid of just those compounds, substances like resveratrol, to protect the rest of our body from them. And so resveratrol and many compounds that are like it never really reach the systemic circulation, your normal blood circulation, because they're eliminated by the liver before they get there. This is a normal part of toxicology. We all know this, and it's why we can eat a lot of plants without becoming poisoned. So it's not so great for resveratrol, right? So the idea was to use the same film-based platform that we use for our pain patients to deliver resveratrol. So essentially it's attached to the inside of your mouth, just with this little film. It's no more complicated than that. So it's now attached to the inside of my cheek, and the blood supply to your cheeks actually is quite healthy, and it actually absorbs resveratrol there. The key part of this is that your cheek tissue is a mucosal membrane. It's just like any other mucosal membrane in your body. But it lacks the defensive enzymes that are in your gut and your liver. And so resveratrol is free to pass into the bloodstream. We exploit this for many of the pain medications within Klaria, but it seems to work very well for resveratrol as well. The film itself that carries resveratrol and helps it attach to the inside of your mouth actually is a natural product. It's derived from kelp, which is a brown algae, and it's purified and processed so that we can use it. And of course we have the patent on how to process it and how to use it for these films. So, in summary, it's a dosage form that's actually designed specifically to be absorbed, and to be absorbed in a way that actually makes it useful for your body. This is the package. It's actually quite a nice package. I'm not a great salesman because I'm a scientist behind this, but actually the way it's packaged, the way it's delivered actually is very useful and usable. And finally, the thing that we've seen in ourselves and in our parents and our families that we've used it on, and some of the first customers to adopt this, is just these strange effects in skin tone, and particularly in hair, nails, and in say our parents, in basically a higher energy level and a little lower level of rheumatic problems in the peripheral joints, like hand problems and foot problems. So for us, this is actually quite promising. We were a little surprised that it actually gave skin effects to begin with, but yeah, that's the way it looks. So, thank you. Stop.
Wow. I think this is so interesting. Here's the pack. So the brand that does this actual substance, nu kan jag prata svenska förresten, heter Resveratrol. Och jag tycker det här är så otroligt spännande. Nu har ni paketerat det lite som, vi pratar om det som anti-aging och att det påverkar huden och håret och allt det här, men det har ju då alltså så många fler fördelar.
Mm. Ja, och det beror på hur saker och ting, din individuella tillstånd egentligen i kroppen. För att har du någonting fel, då den här allmänt förstärkande effekt kan egentligen bidra till en förbättring. Och det är lite konstigt, för att egentligen i läkemedelsindustrin som jag kommer ifrån ska vi vara specifikt på en target och slå ut den så mycket som möjligt så att patienten får just den specifika effekt. Resveratrol verkar tvärtom. Den verkar på ganska många saker samtidigt. Och den samspelet de olika delarna verkar vara viktigt till just de effekterna som vi ser.
Det är spännande, för du pratar ju om att ni har testat det själva och på familj och vänner runt omkring. Efter hur lång tid när man börjar äta det märkte ni effekter? Jag förstår att det är också individuellt beroende på vad det är kroppen behövde ta upp.
Ja, det är en bra fråga för att egentligen inom 2-3 veckor brukar man börja se effekterna. Och framförallt de nätverk och ålderskrämparna börjar försvinna efter kanske en vecka. Men hudeffekterna förekommer kanske efter 2-3 veckor. Och sen lite mer förbättring i minnet och så. De kommer kanske efter 5-6 veckor.
Så ganska snabba resultat. Och sen förstärks det över tid.
Det är snabbt eller inte, men så är det. Och sen viktnedgång och just den här aptitdämpningseffekt. Den förekommer ganska snabbt också.
Spännande. Vi har Micke här som säljer Resveratrol. Och ni har en monter här borta som jag tycker att ni alla ska gå till här efteråt. Men Micke, berätta lite om hur det är ju det här filmen man lägger på där. Hur många gånger om dagen ska man ta den här?
Ja, precis. Det som är lite speciellt då med Resveratrol är en ganska snabb nedbrytningstid. Vilket innebär att man behöver ta det här 3 gånger om dagen. Så det är morgon, middag och kväll. Och då tar man 2 filmer, en i varje sida eller rakt upp i gommen. Och för att komma ihåg det här så finns det en app som man kan ladda ner. Så den finns där appar finns. Den heter Resveratrol. Då får man en liten påminnelse så man kan också hålla lite koll på hur många man har tagit den senaste månaden. Ett sånt här pack som är det vi säljer innehåller 32 dagars Resveratrol. Så att det är en månadsförpackning. Man kan antingen abonnera på den. Då kostar det 845 kronor. Man kan köpa ett pack, kostar 995 och idag säljer vi då för 600 eller 599. Och det finns precis runt hörnet här.
Spännande. Mycket spännande. Tusen tack för att ni har tagit fram det här. Så känns det ju lite. Det känns nästan lite too good to be true. Men man får väl uppleva och se vad man själv känner.
Ja, verkligen. Kom och snacka med oss annars. Vi står precis här runt hörnet.
Så är det någon som har någon fråga när vi ändå har toxikologen och all vetenskap här på scen? Är det någon som vill passa på att fråga någonting? Nej, men då har ni ju möjligheten att ta det i montern. Skott kommer också finnas i montern för att svara på eventuella frågor. Så tack så hemskt mycket för en härlig intressant föreläsning.